You are flying low over the jungle of South Vietnam, barely 100 feet above the treetops. The engines of your C-123 aircraft roar. A fine mist trails behind you, drifting down onto the endless green canopy below. It smells faintly sweet, almost like fresh-cut grass. You are not dropping bombs. You are not firing a single round. Yet the weapon you are spraying will kill more people over more decades than almost any bullet fired in this war. In 1966, you believe you are simply clearing the trees. You do not yet know that the mist settling on your own skin will follow you home. The war in Vietnam had a problem that no rifle could solve: the jungle. The enemy used the dense triple canopy forest as a shield. They hid supply trails beneath it. They ambushed patrols from inside it. American commanders looked at that ocean of green and asked a simple question: what if you could simply make the jungle disappear? The answer was a program called Operation Ranch Hand. Its dark motto, painted on the crew's equipment, was chillingly cheerful: only you can prevent a forest. The chemical had a strange, ordinary name. It came in 55-gallon steel drums, each marked with a colored stripe for identification. There was Agent White, Agent Blue, Agent Purple, but the most heavily used by far carried a single orange band around its middle. The soldiers simply called it Agent Orange. It was a powerful herbicide, a plant killer, a blend of two chemicals designed to make leaves fall and crops wither. To the men handling it, it was just defoliant, just a tool for killing weeds on a massive scale. Who could imagine that killing plants could kill people? Between 1962 and 1971, the United States sprayed roughly 20 million gallons of herbicides across South Vietnam. Ranch hand crews flew low and slow, the most dangerous way to fly, painting the forests and fields in overlapping stripes. Around 5 million acres of forest were defoliated. Vast mangrove swamps in the Mekong Delta were killed outright and never fully recovered. From the air, the results looked like a miracle of modern chemistry. The green shield melted away. The hidden trails were exposed. Commanders saw exactly what they wanted to see. But hidden inside Agent Orange was a contaminant that no one on those flights fully understood. It was called dioxin, specifically a form known as TCDD. It was not added on purpose. It was a byproduct, created accidentally during the rushed manufacturing of the herbicide. And it is one of the most toxic substances ever studied. Dioxin does not break down quickly. It settles into soil. It seeps into rivers. It builds up in fish, in animals, and finally in the fat of the human body, where it can linger for years. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see, cannot smell, and cannot wash off? At first, no one connected the dots. The spraying was celebrated. Then the reports began to trickle in. Vietnamese villages downstream of the sprayed zones spoke of strange sicknesses, miscarriages, children born with severe deformities. And it was not only the Vietnamese. The American soldiers who patrolled through freshly sprayed jungle, who drank from contaminated streams, who filled sandbags with poisoned soil, began coming home with illnesses that made no sense for men in their 20s and 30s. Rare cancers, nerve damage, and then, most heartbreaking of all, birth defects in their own children. There is one story that captures the tragedy better than any statistic. Admiral Elmo Zumwalt commanded the American naval forces in Vietnam. To protect his sailors patrolling the rivers of the Mekong Delta, he ordered the banks sprayed heavily with Agent Orange to strip away the foliage that hid enemy ambushes. It was a decision meant to save lives. But one of the young officers commanding a patrol boat in those very rivers was his own son, Elmo Zumwalt III. Years after the war, the younger Zumwalt developed cancer. He believed the herbicide his own father had ordered was the cause. He died in 1988, at just 42 years old. His father lived with that knowledge for the rest of his life. Can you imagine giving an order to protect your son, only to wonder if it killed him? The American veterans who returned home found themselves in a different kind of battle. When they linked their illnesses to Agent Orange, the government and the chemical companies at first denied any connection, so the veterans fought back. In 1979, they launched a massive class-action lawsuit against the manufacturers. In 1984, the chemical companies agreed to a settlement of $180 million without admitting fault. It was a landmark moment, but for many families, it was far too little and far too late. The Department of Veterans Affairs would eventually recognize a long list of diseases linked to Agent Orange exposure, from certain cancers to Parkinson's disease. Now consider the scale on the other side. The The Vietnamese Red Cross has estimated that as many as 3 million Vietnamese people have been affected by Agent Orange, including hundreds of thousands of children born with serious birth defects. Some of these children belong to the third generation, grandchildren of those first exposed, still being born with conditions their families trace back to the war. The dioxin, it turned out, could damage the genetic legacy passed from parent to child. This is why Agent Orange is sometimes called a weapon that never stops firing. The war ended in 1975. The poison did not. The land itself remembers too. Around former American air bases like Da Nang and Bien Hoa, where the barrels were stored, loaded, and sometimes spilled, the soil became dioxin hotspots. Decades later, the contamination was still there, seeping into the food chain. It took until 2012 for the United States and Vietnam, former enemies, to begin a joint cleanup of the Da Nang site, scraping and treating tens of thousands of cubic meters of poisoned earth. It was one of the strangest legacies of the war. Two nations that once fought each other, now working side by side to undo the invisible damage left behind. Here is the counterintuitive twist. Agent Orange was never designed as a weapon to kill human beings. It was an agricultural chemical, a plant killer, meant only to strip the leaves from trees. Its makers and the men who sprayed it genuinely believed it was harmless to people. And that is precisely what made it so devastating. A bullet announces itself. A bomb leaves a crater you can see and mourn. But dioxin was silent. It gave no warning. Soldiers walked through the mist and felt nothing. Families drank the water and tasted nothing. The harm revealed itself only years later, in hospital wards and delivery rooms, long after anyone could point to the moment of injury. What is more terrifying, a weapon that kills instantly, or one that waits a generation to show its face? The legacy of Agent Orange reshaped how the world thinks about war itself. It forced hard new questions about the long-term consequences of the weapons we use. It became a central argument in debates over chemical warfare and environmental destruction as tools of conflict. Scientists who study the aftermath of wars now know that the fighting does not end when the shooting stops. The land can carry wounds, the water can carry wounds, and the human body can carry wounds silently across generations, waiting to appear in children who were born decades after the last shot was fired. Today in Vietnam, there are peace villages and care centers filled with young people living with the consequences of a chemical sprayed before they were born. Some cannot walk, some cannot speak. Their caretakers are often the aging veterans and parents who survived the war itself. Meanwhile, in America, aging veterans still file claims, still attend medical checkups, still watch for the diseases they know are linked to a mist they flew through half a century ago. The war created two groups of victims on opposite sides of the world, bound together by the same invisible poison. You are flying low over the jungle of South Vietnam, barely 100 feet above the treetops. The fine mist trails behind you, drifting down onto the endless green canopy below. Back then, you believed you were simply clearing the trees, winning a small victory over the jungle that hid your enemy. Now you understand what that gentle, sweet-smelling mist truly was. It was not the end of a forest. It was the beginning of a war that would outlive the war, settling into soil and water and blood, and reaching forward across the years to touch children who would never know your name, in a country you thought you had already left behind.